The Fire Emblem franchise is honestly one of the best video game series out there. It has good gameplay, amazing soundtrack, interesting lore, and also a good presentation. Obviously, there are some exceptions in the series, but that's not the point. Out of all these elements, I feel like one is way more underappreciated than the others. This. When someone talks about Fire Emblem, you always hear blue-haired anime boys, level design, the story, the characters, or the game mechanics. And that makes sense. These elements are very prominent and play a huge role in the core aspect of most Fire Emblem games. But I'd say that the presentation also deserves some praise. From the sprites, to the portraits, and to the menus. FE games were always well made aesthetically, although I must admit that the text in treehouses is really small. One amazing thing Fire Emblem excels at with its presentation has to be the character renders. They are very pleasing to look at. Not only are they well drawn, but they also show a lot about what the character is all about. It's a shame that these renders are not often present in their games because so much thought is put into them. Most of the time, all you have are some miniature sprites and some portraits with different expressions. Is that a bad thing? No, absolutely not. As an RPG, it makes sense to focus more on the gameplay than the aesthetic. I mean, look at Pokemon and Undertale. There's not a lot of sprites for a single character, and the same goes for Fire Emblem games. But that is what makes their character renders so special. With them, you finally get to see more about a character, unlike with the bland portraits. These artworks show so much, despite how small they seem. Obviously, they weren't always perfect. The old games, unsurprisingly, have the least details, which makes sense. But man, did Intelligent Systems really stepped up their game throughout the years. This can be seen especially with characters that have multiple game iterations, like wow, did Mort really glow up? By comparing the old and the new renders, you can see how much care they slowly put into these artworks. But that's not to say that the past games have bad renders. In fact, some of them are really cool. It's definitely with the GBA games that they started to pour more effort into these renders. At a glance, they all seem like they're posing, which yes, that is indeed correct. By looking at their poses, we can see a lot of their personality. Roy, preparing for combat, but unlike in Smash where he's portrayed as a hot-headed, energetic person, he's more calm and collected. His blade isn't facing forward as he is taking a more defensive stance, showing how he's reluctant to fight and wants to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Lilina, doing some skips, being all cheerful and happy. Her friendly attitude is very noticeable. Similar to her is Shanna, smiling at you with her bubbly attitude. It's really interesting to see the contrast between her and her sisters when you put the renders next to each other. Tia has a more serious and stiff expression, representing how hard it is for her to express her emotions at times, while Juno, being the older of the three, has a more mature and serene presence. In Hector's render, we really see his bold personality. He's standing tall with confidence, his hand on his hip, ready for assertive action. Despite both being a noble, he really differs from Eliwood, who takes a calm yet prepared stance, definitely the more formal of the two. Lyn, while having little knowledge of noble manners and customs, is still shown with a somewhat more orthodox and elegant pose compared to Hector. Man, the three of their renders really represents them well, and also they make a perfect group picture altogether. Speaking of characters that are paired well, take a look at Ephraim and Erica. They are perfectly aligned to one another, and it's even the pose that they use in the box art. Both of them are facing opposing directions due to their different natures. Ephraim is confident and determined, while Erica is more careful and gentle. And finally, there's Chad, posing like a Chad. For GBA games, the renders were really well done, but they only get better from here. For Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, Kita Senri was in charge for the character illustrations. It's interesting to see that despite changing artists, the artworks still keep the same attention to detail, if not more than the previous games. Characters are now shown with more unique poses, and something about the coloring is just so eye-catching. Not only that, but characters are now doing more than just standing still. There's Mordecai playing with the squirrels, Jill taking care of her wyvern, Makalov just chilling on his horse with a smirk on his face, and man, comparing the renders from Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn is so satisfying. Ike, while he has always been a determined and serious person, you can definitely see how he has matured throughout both games. He really has the aura of a hero. The same goes with the other characters. Everyone's grown up and it's amazing to see. Speaking about amazing things to see, that's exactly how I felt when I saw the renders of the remakes. While not everyone got an official render, the new designs for these old characters are beautiful. Seeing them in higher resolution is also a plus, but the quality of Fire Emblem's artwork improved even further with the release of the 3DS games. With a new Fire Emblem title comes a bunch of new characters, new renders, and a new artist, Yusuke Kozaki. Just like the previous games, Awakening did a fantastic job with the renders, despite having a different art style. In here, everyone just oozes with personality. Just by looking at someone's pose and expression, you can see what the character is all about. Chrom, on guard, robust. Frederick, serious, stern, and cautious. Vike, confident, flamboyant. Tarja, cold, mysterious, and eerie. Maribel, snob, prideful, and elegant. Also, notice how characters are more dynamic and unique with their renders compared to some of the past games. Cynthia, being energetic and trying to make a heroic pose. Virion, just sipping tea and acting all noble-like. Anna, sitting on a big bag of gold, thinking of a new plan to make profits. The Morgans, planning a strategy for the next battle. By the way, what is up with awakening characters leaning forward and showing their back to the camera? This game is full of wonderful renders, and this indeed continues with the future titles. In Fire Emblem Fates, Kozaki is again in charge of the character designs and illustrations. Just like his work in Awakening, he did an amazing job with the artwork. But one thing I love about FE14's renders is how some characters are perfectly grouped up with one another. Felicia and Fiora, both of Corrin's maids, preparing to attack a foe. Felicia, being the clumsy person that she is, accidentally lets go of her knife, while her sister, the most skilled out of the two, firmly grasps her weapon while keeping a more professional expression. Both Corrins also seem to be aligned pretty well. They are both facing opposing directions, as if they were different people that did not choose the same fate. In fact, female Corrin is associated with Nor, while male Corrin is associated with Hoshido. On the topic of those two kingdoms, it's cool to see how the royal siblings are paired up as if they were fighting one another. Ryoma and Xander, readying their blades for a fierce battle. Takumi and Leo, preparing to face off in a long-range fight. Sakura and Elise, firing their staffs at one another. And Hinoka and Camilla, the only odd ones that aren't eye to eye. While the royals are duking it out, the retainers are posing with one another, which is fun to see. Hinata and Oboro, pairing up for battle. Odin doing his theatrical shenanigans, while Niles is just looking at them, probably used to it by now. Saizo and Kagero look like they're posing for a movie poster, although I think Kaze and his brother's render matches better. And there's Corrin's retainers, looking like the guards of some final boss. Say what you want about Fates, but I think this game did amazing with the renders. It definitely did a better job of showing personality with their poses compared to the previous games. But with the release of another upcoming Fire Emblem game, the renders take a change in style. For Shadows of Valentia, Hidari is now in charge of the character artwork. He's probably my favorite Fire Emblem artist due to how unique his art style is. I'm not an art professional or anything, but there's something so special about his designs and coloring. It's mesmerizing to see many old characters drawn in high resolution. For the renders, the poses are definitely more laid back compared to the previous game, as the majority are just casually standing, though they still convey their nature perfectly through their posing. Alm, headstrong but steadfast. Celica, refined and formal. Cliff, calm, dull. Gray, easygoing but goofy. The White Wing sisters are also really well done, as you can see their contrast in personality. S, being the younger of the three, is shown being pure and innocent. Katia is the more serious out of the three, and Paula being the mature and caring sister. It's cool to see how the attention to detail on the renders is kept despite having a different artist. The same can be said for the Switch installment of the series, Fire Emblem Three Houses. For this game, Shinatsu Kuruhana provided the artwork for the characters. Just like Hidari, she also has a distinct art style. But don't you worry, because the renders, surprise surprise, also do a good job of showing the character's quirks. Edelgard really captures the aura of a soon-to-be emperor with her fierce gaze and proud posture. And man, does the time skip art take it to another level. She really is giving some menacing aura with her high demeanor. Dimitri has a very serious and sincere expression. He embodies very well the nature of a noble knight. But underneath those eyes lies a bit of ominous darkness, which is heavily portrayed in his older render. Claude seems very casual and relaxed on the surface. Still, you can somewhat see a bit of his cunning attitude with that expression of his. Also, notice how he's the only house leader that isn't holding a weapon. Probably because he's the least violent out of the three. In his adult render, however, he's carrying Failnaught, where he has to fight due to the ongoing war. Other students also have nice artworks, such as Lindhart being tired as always, and Hilda trying to ask you to do a favor for her. Three Houses has some really good renders. It didn't have as much as the previous games, but it kept the same principles. But there's a certain other Fire Emblem game that managed to beat every other title in both quality and quantity with its artwork. Fire Emblem Heroes. The special thing about this mobile game is that every character has 3 to 4 unique renders to them, except if you're Camilla and have a gajillion of alts. The previous renders were all dynamic poses that displayed a character's trait, but in Heroes, you have art that displays a character during their attacks and when they are damaged. You finally get to see your favorite heroes, new and old, in a high-resolution render in the heat of battle. Take a look at Mark. In his neutral pose, we see his elegant yet soft presence, gracefully holding his cape like a fine leader he is. When he is attacking, his hand displays really well his formal demeanor while still being determined. And when he's damaged, he's still pushing forward towards the fight, as he is a kind-hearted person that ignores his own suffering to help others in need. Even his legendary variant captures his charismatic aura. Arvis is intimidating in both his neutral and attacking art. With that high commanding posture, he really is worthy of the Flame Emperor title. Also, his art seems to be a reference to his old render. Sigurd's art is majestic. Every single one of his renders just represents really well his chivalrous nature. He definitely looks like a legendary hero. Now, being the crossover game that Fire Emblem Heroes is, there's no way I can cover everyone here, so I'll just go over the ones I really like. The Grimas are very well drawn. You really see the ominous and menacing presence to the Fell Dragon with their art. And then there's Halloween Robin. Ephraim really displays his courageous nature. Every pose he does just brims with confidence. I love how in his legendary art he is still smiling when being heavily damaged. Seeing the different Annas is really interesting. Although Apotheosis and the Order of Heroes Anna are different, you still see the whimsical character in both of their expressions. Shannon's art is probably one of the most unique ones in the game. His special art is just dazzling, and his injured one shows him being pushed back. Most damage renders just show torn clothes, so it's really cool to imagine what's happening in Shannon's fight. Despite being the same person, Masked Mart and Lucina behave very differently in their poses. Mart looks stiff and always on guard, while Lucina feels way more comfortable. It's probably because they were both summoned from the worlds at different times. In both female and male Violet's render, they are finally seen smiling, which is probably because they were summoned during their teaching phase, where they slowly started to develop more emotions. The Choose Your Legends designs are also very amazing. Seeing Roy, Ike, and Ephraim taking on their parents' outfits is just so heartwarming. The same can be said with Hector using his older brother's armor. The summoner's art really represents the player base, frustrated for summoning pity breakers, and disappointed in the never-ending cycle of power creep. And I think that's all for the renders I'll talk about. I know that there are a lot more artworks that are noteworthy and some that are really, weird. But I hope that with this video, you realize how much effort the artist and intelligent system puts into their character renders. Because man, are they beautiful.